Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the final event of our race exhibit Flint Truth and Action Partnership Project Speaker Series. The Flint Truth and Action Partnership Project, which is housed in the Office of Outreach at U of M Flint, is supported by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Its intent is to expand U of M Flint's community engagement and increase civic engagement and participation by engaging in community engagement and community-based participatory projects driven by input from residents. The goal of the Flint Truth and Action Partnership Project is to offer opportunities that both inform and assist in the development of collaborative relationships between the U of M Flint campus and the Flint community. Input from our community visioning sessions led to the collective efforts with the Community Foundation of Greater Flint, the Sloan Museum, and the Ruth Mott Foundation in hosting the national Race Are We So Different exhibit, which is currently on display at the Sloan Museum. The exhibit explores the topic of race from historical, experiential, and anthropological perspectives. In conjunction with the presence of the race exhibit, a series of speaking events were coordinated throughout the community to discuss the effects of race and systemic racism in our current society. This is the final session of our series. Today we are honored to host Dr. Yolanda Moses, whose keynote speech is entitled Beyond Diversity and Inclusion, Creating Culturally Competent Institutions for a Socially Just World. Before we continue with our program, we would like to thank the Community Foundation of Greater Flint, the Ruth Mott Foundation, and Sloan Museum for their partnership surrounding the race exhibit. Our team from the Office of Outreach, our Chancellor and Provost for their support of our initiatives, the events and ITS staff, and a special thank you to the W.K. Kellogg Foundation for their generous funding of the Flint Truth and Action Partnership Project. At this time, I invite our interim provost and vice chancellor of academic affairs, Dr. Susan Alcock, to the stage to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning.
Good morning. Now I'm an archaeologist by training and at heart, and as a famous archaeologist once said, archaeology is anthropology or it is nothing. I think that was Louis Binford, and it is indeed a great day for anthropology on the University of Michigan-Flint campus. My principal task right now, though, is to introduce Dr. Yolanda Moses, and this is an honor and a pleasure, and you guys are about just to get blown away, because I'm going to just tell you just a few things about her and her cursus honorum, as we say in Latin, the honor roll of her life. She's a professor of anthropology and a former associate vice chancellor for diversity, equity, and excellence at the University of California, Riverside. She's also a former president of the City College City University of New York, CUNY, the CUNYverse, and a former president of the American Association for Higher Education in Washington, D.C. Now, her research focuses on the broad questions of the origins of social inequality in complex societies. That's a huge question. And she does this through the use of comparative ethnographic and survey methods. She's explored gender and class disparities in the Caribbean, East Africa, and of course in the United States. More recently, her research is focused on issues of diversity and change in universities and colleges in the US, India, Europe, South Africa, and Australia. She served on steering groups of several U.S. higher education projects, the National Council for Research on Women, Campus Women Lead, and the Women of Color Research Collective. She's a principal investigator on a major NSF advanced grant at UC Riverside, and the goal of that grant is to promote women in leadership roles in the STEM fields, especially women of color in the state of California, and that's a model that all of us should look to. She's co-principal investigator, co-PI, and chair of the National Advisory Board of a multi-year national public education project sponsored by the American Anthropological Association, which is the big bug in the field of anthropology. And it was funded by NSF and the Ford Foundation on race and human variation, and the Race Are We So Different exhibit was born out of that work. Mentioning the AAA, as we call it, Dr. Moses was the president of the American Anthropological Association, and now we get to the honors, which goes a while. She's received the American Anthropological Association Franz Boas Award, that was just in 2015, for distinguished service to the field of anthropology. 2017, she received a Distinguished Award for Outstanding in Research and Service from the Organization of the Anthropological Study of North America, and a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association of Black Anthropologists. Dr. Moses served as a Fulbright Distinguished Chair in Cultural Competence at the National Center for Cultural Competence at the University of Sydney in 2017. That's Sydney, Australia. She returned to Sydney in 2018 to keynote a national higher education conference there. This is a global profile. She's just finished phase 1 of a grant funded by the Ford Foundation again to establish, and this is extremely cool, to establish a global network for women in higher education leadership, women in conflict, war-torn, and post-conflict societies. And this grant will help to establish a global network of women leaders in higher education to share their voices and experiences in the peace-building process. It will especially help to articulate the role of universities and colleges in rebuilding civil society. And every now and then when one gets a little depressed about being in higher ed and universities and, oh, what can we do, what can we do, I'm going to think about her and from now on. So in light of our current socio-political climate, Dr. Moses is going to share with us, the significant role that institutions of higher learning can play, must play, in fostering, and I quote, empathetic critical thinking, and to enable students to develop the capacity to be both the locally and globally minded change makers that we need, end quote, and boy, do we need it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure and my honor. Please welcome with me Dr. Yolanda Moses.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for giving me mild winter weather. Coming from California, you know I have to ease into this thing called winter. We had something called rain the other day, and it really sort of messed up everybody's systems in California, so that gives you some sense of how I'm adjusting to the climate. But one of the things that we think about as anthropologists as we get older is what kind of legacy we're going to leave. What difference does it make that we've been here or not? And I was very blessed to be asked to be a part of the group of people that put together the Race Project. And it's the gift that keeps on giving for us. The first exhibit opened in 2007 at the Science Museum of Minnesota, and the exhibit and the materials are still circulating. What we thought would be a one-off public education project has turned into a tool that is being used here and in other places to jumpstart conversations around the very difficult topic of race in our country and what we need to do about it if we are going to survive as a pluralistic, democratic country. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. You can invite me back for that talk. I am here to talk about what needs to happen in colleges and universities to move beyond our conversations about diversity and inclusion, because we've been talking about it for, at least I have anyway, for at least 20 years, 25 years. And we're now at that point where we all say we value it, but what are we doing to implement the kind of environment in which the outcome are institutions for a socially just world? And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to zoom out and zoom in and then zoom out again and do this all in half an hour. so I better get going, right? So we'll talk about dilemmas, institutional identities, toward this model. We're not there yet. Some promising practices that are out there, and the way forward, and then zooming back into Flint. First of all, we have to understand that the work that we're doing today in the United States is in a particular context. It is a context where there's unrest on our campuses, where we're re-examining our campus histories and what the presence of our campuses and the histories of our campuses say about diversity and inclusion. We're seeing our students protesting, and if you recall, those of you who are baby boomers, we did the same thing in the 70s when we were being given one line of the commitment of the institution when in fact institutions were not living up to that. And we called the leadership on that. And if we think about students that are protesting today, that's what they're doing. They're saying, you're inviting us here to be a part of this, but then we can't tell you what it is that's not working for us in this space, in this institution. We have a lot of external challenges from powerful political and economic challengers. In California, it was our state legislature, not anymore because we're pretty much a blue state now, but the legacy of Proposition 209, where we could not take race, class, or gender into account in terms of the work that we did, is still being felt in that state. Around the nation, we also are seeing the impact of state houses that don't think diversity should be as broad as it is. For example, in Tennessee, the University of Tennessee, the state took away the funding from Knoxville because they had a broad-based diversity program versus one that just focused on dealing with the federal guidelines, right, of discrimination. The broader value of diversity was something that the legislators didn't think was should be funded. There are recent studies, including Pew, that question even the value of higher education. That is, are we getting the value for the money that we're investing in terms of student loans, in terms of how long it's going to take to pay off these debts? Is this something that we're getting return on value for? And how do we know this? Where is the evidence that this is the case? So while, yes, a higher education degree has been the key to the middle class, is it worth it, is a question that's being asked. We're in a very divisive mode domestically. Here in the US, in 2016, we saw two different kinds of populisms on either side, right? There was the populism on the left and the populism on the right that resulted in the election of a president that is promoting a certain kind of populism and nationalism. But as a result of that, there is a rise of nationalism, white nationalism, and a rise of hate crimes that have to be taken into account. That's in the US. If we look at England with Brexit, if we look at what's happening in Europe and in other countries, populism is on the rise in those countries too. And as anthropologists, what we do is ask the question behind the question. And that is, why is this happening, not just in one place, but globally at this point in time, which is a researchable question. So it brings it back to what universities can do. And then there are the repercussions of us becoming more inward-looking and closing our borders, sending signals that we are not a globally oriented country anymore, but looking more inward. The result in higher education is that there are fewer students, international students, that are coming just at a time when across the U.S., in all our mission statements, what does it say? We want globalization. We want global students. We want students to understand the world that they're going to be living in once they graduate. So these are the dilemmas and the conundrums in which we're trying to do our work, right? We just want to do our work. And this is the environment. So institutional identities, what are the kinds of questions? Who are we? And who are our institutions set up for? And that means to take that look back. Historically, the University of Michigan was established in 1817. The University of California was established in 1850, something, 7, I think. And the idea is, in 2018, are those missions still the same? University of Michigan is a land-grant university. Land-grant universities were established by the federal government to create new knowledge, but to also be engaged and to be of service to their communities. That was the founding mission. Now you can ask yourself, is that what's happening today? Are we in need of new missions to accommodate our commitment to the development of cultural competence? Because that's what we're going to have to do as individuals, but as institutions have to become culturally competent. As members of the university, as a faculty member, my first commitment is to my discipline and to my department. My second commitment is as a university citizen. If we look at staff, if we look at students, we're all here for a purpose. The question is, how do we create community in which we're all working together toward the outcome that we say we want? And does it matter if you're public or if you're private? The Harvards, the Stanfords, the Penn States, all of us have to decide who we are as an institution and what that means in terms of how we work and how we operate within our communities. And here's the question, are we equipped, even if we want to do this, and this is what it means moving past diversity and inclusion, even if we want to do this, do we have the skills necessary, and are we organized in our institutions to do this work? If we do not have the difficult conversations to get us to that point, then we're going to, in 10 years, have me or somebody else back here, and we're going to be talking about the same things. Moving forward, how do we move forward? Because if we're not talking about new paradigms, new ways of engaging, new ways of interacting, then we're certifying the status quo. So what does it mean to move toward an institutional model of cultural competence? An institutional model, not just where one person is responsible, and I'll get to that list. We need a kind of comprehensive, I call it aspirational model, because we're not there yet, but something for us to move forward to. And I'm going to suggest some guideposts, some ways to do that. The first has to do with leadership, the development of leadership, right, at all levels. And I mean deep leadership, not just lip service. Starting at the top with the board here. Do you have a campus board or a system-wide board? Okay, we do too. Board of Regents. So there's a role for them to play. There's a role for the president, obviously, as the embodier of the values, the symbols of the university. Provost, Chief Diversity Officer, or the person on the campus who's recognized for that. More and more across the U.S., this is a position that's being put into place. But it's not only that person's job. And that's what happens with people who only have, who the institution puts the burden on their shoulders. They burn out, right? They can't do it. It's an institutional job. Deans, middle managers. Actually, the dean's role was the one that I loved the best because I had people protecting me up here and I had people protecting me down here, and I could do what I wanted to do. I don't know how that works here, but that was great. Middle managers can be really good change agents. Department heads, we have a system in the state of California where department chairs or department heads are not really powerful people. They can't do things, right? And then the faculty. The research shows that if you're not including adjuncts in the transformational change work that you're doing, it's not going to happen because they're the ones that are often on the front lines, often dealing with the huge introductory classes or dealing with students who are, for the first time, thinking about what it means to be in the university. And keeping them in the loop is really important. There are some places where adjunct faculty are not even invited to department meetings, so they don't even know what's going on. And then staff. A staff council, an institutional staff body that will allow them to have a voice through surveys, through looking at issues regularly, through having a robust way to solve conflicts. And I don't necessarily mean your union. Unions help, but there has to be an institutional commitment that every staff member's voice can be heard. And then, of course, there's students who, undergraduate and grad, you have both. And so it's like, what is the experience? For the past 15 years anyway, most of the focus in diversity has been on recruitment. Getting those students to the institutions so that our pictures look great, right? And so that we have this group here, this group there, this group here, this group there. But it's also about retention, right? And success, student success. And the way students experience being on campuses are really, really important. So their leadership training, our leadership training to work with them, and the ability for them to ask questions, to speak truth to power, and to not be silenced is really, really important. Because we're inviting young people to participate in a process that may be harmful for them if they don't speak up. And if we are not allowing them to speak up, then we're hastening their we're impeding their ability to be successful. So it's not just about what happens in the classroom, it's about what happens when you're walking across campus and get stopped because you look suspicious, right? There are all kinds of ways in which we send signals that you're not welcome here on our campus. So I looked up your diversity statement through institutional equity and Title IX, and I think it's fine for what it says, but that office is only one office, right? To do the work. And the idea is, how do we broaden the burden and the responsibility to a wider group of people? In California, we had the problem of not only coming up with a diversity statement, but coming up with a diversity statement in a state where we're not supposed to talk about diversity because it's against the law. So what did we do? we tied everything we did around diversity to the core excellence values of the University of California. Do we get challenged? Yes, every single day we do. People say, organizations say, legislators say, you're violating the law. And we say, no, we're not. This is how we define excellence, and this is what we're doing as a university. Diversity and cultural competence. It's important that we plan strategies and tactics, because otherwise we're in that situation where we continue to ask the question, why is this so slow? Why so slow? Part of it is that we have what I call random acts of diversity. It's everywhere, right? We have this program, that program, this program, that program. And it looks as though a lot of stuff is happening, but how do we know it's effective? And how do we know that it's furthering the mission of the institution? So we need to be more intentional about using our data to drive our budgets and to drive our initiatives, because we're never going to have enough money in public institutions to do our work. We also have to intentionally increase the visibility and cohesion of our diversity efforts. Establishing diversity councils that are diverse themselves and are made up of people who will bring ideas that will challenge what we think should happen, because we are the university, and people coming to us from outside the university may not have the PhDs and the master's degrees, but come from the schools of hard knocks and education and street smarts and all of those things that have made them and their organizations successful. We also need a way to assess cultural competency of faculty, staff, and administrators. If we have professional development funds, how do we know those funds are doing what we want them to do? Is this development built into performance evaluations? And how are we assessing whether or not we're being effective that way? At the institutional level, there are several organizations that have guidelines, including NADOHE, which is the National Association for Chief Diversity Officers, have put out professional guidelines. The National Association for Sustainability in Higher Education also have guidelines for institutional cultural competence that are out there that can be used. And your various professional organizations also would probably have some markers that you could use as well. So what are some promising practices? Well, one, it's from Brown University, Ruth Simmons, and this is a practice where the institution tackled a very tough problem. And this was the problem, the Slavery and Justice Project. There's a second that my boss, the president of the University of California, is tackling, and it has to do with what do we do with our DACA students, our students who are undocumented in our campuses around the state of California. The third one is University of Virginia, with the rise of the white nationalists in that town of Charlottesville, and just recently, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, what to do with Silent Sam. Now, at Brown University, there was a student protest once students learned the history of Brown University. That is, Brown University was funded by funds built by slaves, but founded by funds from the slave trade. That's a problem for some students. So as a result, what Ruth Brown did, who is a brilliant woman, was to stop everything, bring the campus together. So this wasn't just an issue she was handling. And they spent some time thinking and talking about this and decided to integrate that history into the campus. This is history. So if you go to Brown University, you see a monument to that history, and you also see a written history that anybody passing that square can see. And that was a 1 or 2 year process. At the University of California, Janet Napolitano had been the head of Homeland Security before she took this job. And in 2018, she is suing the President of the United States to stop the process so that there can be some opportunity to think about and talk about what the implications are of not supporting these students. We have over 450,000 students in our university who are undocumented students because they came up through our educational system. She consulted with all the heads of the student government, with all the heads of the faculty government before she did this, because she knew that there could be political ramifications for the university. And with that consent, she was able to forcefully say, I am speaking on behalf of my, of the folks in my, of my university. The University of Virginia, the post-KKK march in August 12, 2017 is a work still in progress. They're not sure exactly how to proceed, but they put together a group of people that composed of community people, faculty, staff, students and administrators to talk about what the University of Virginia will be and how the University of Virginia will interact with people from off campus or on campus who are promoting hate. So the way forward, as I see it, is to know ourselves, and I mean know ourselves deeply, to understand the barriers that we face and to understand that they're not minimal. Many of them are structural, and many of them will have us call into question our very core historical position and say, is this who we want to be moving forward? And if not, how do we create that institution we want to be? It's also important to form alliances, and I see from this project that's one of the things that you're doing. And on campus, to speak, to have people who can speak on your behalf because they know your issues, people who can speak when you're not in the room, you know that they have your back. That's really important to do. It's important to have allies for people who are voiceless in our process. And it's also important as administrators, as faculty, as people who are entrepreneurial, to take advantage of what is on the horizon. That is, what is out there that we can use to help promote the work that we're doing, whether it's federal, local, private, public-private partnerships. What are the kinds of things that will help us promote the kind of work that we want to do? Some things take money. Some things don't. For those things that take money, then we have to be opportunistic about getting those funds. It's really, really important that we, and I mean myself as well at the University of California, as well as you all, to build those external partnerships. And looking through your catalog and your programs, one example would be the continuing to support the mission, the vision, and the goal of units on campus, like the Urban Health and Wellness Center, that have already established programs and success in the community, and to learn from them. What are the things that other programs can do to be like them? A second thing that's immediate is to help implement the recommendations from the community visioning conversations that have been taking place at the Sloan Museum through their project, and through the Sloan Museum and the Community Foundation of Greater Flint and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. This is an initiative that is happening here, but it's also happening in other places in the United States, right? It is timely, and they are looking for models, particularly models that link what we know in higher education institutions with what communities know, and how those work together for the benefit of both. That's really important. Because historically, universities have been the city, excuse me, the city on the hill. And there have not always been good town-gown relations. This is an opportunity to do that and to enrich both the university and the community. And I would say, because you have one, and not every campus does, to support the Office of University Outreach. Because it's not only a good thing to do because of the race project or whatever, this is a part of the mission of a land-grant university. Remember, I said 1815, the mission was to create new knowledge and serve the community. Back in that day, the community was primarily agrarian. It was farming. It was helping farmers to be better farmers, right? Produce better crops so that we could all eat better. In the 21st century, it's a different kind of project. But the mission is to be engaged in that work as a part of the legacy. Finally, I'd like to say that democracy is under attack, not just here in the West, but in other parts of the world as well. Populism and fascism is on the rise, and the question is, what will happen to those democracies that are in trouble? And if we're not educating our students to be a part of that change conversation, then we're not preparing them for the world that they are going to live in and are living in to a certain extent. We need critical thinking skills, and we need to have the ability to have them think, act, and work across boundaries globally. I belong to an organization called the Global Citizenship Alliance, and I have some literature on the table that I'll give you if you would like. But that's exactly what we are about. Educating young people, still in university, linking them to other students around the world so that they can have those kinds of experiences. We have to use social media, you know that already, because that's how our students engage with the world these days. We also have to think about ways of getting what we know, and what we know is sound education, into the hands of policymakers in language that they can understand that will help them make better policies and laws on behalf of all of us. And we have to enhance our regional and global networks. What does Flint have in common with Ann Arbor and Dearborn? They're part of the same system. You also need to know what you have in common with other universities around the US and in other parts of the world who are trying to do the same things that you're doing right here. Those partnerships will be very, very important as well. So in conclusion, I want to say that we cannot give fear, you can read it along with me, or silence a place in our institutions if we truly want to promote social justice in a pluralistic democracy. And the question is, if not us, then who's going to do that work? Where else is it going to happen? Through our examples of modeling leadership in teaching and pedagogy, it's in our classrooms where a lot of this happens. Administrative best practices, are we doing what we should to help keep this cultural competence on track institutionally? And do we have authentic community links? If we do this, then I believe we will meet our responsibility as academics and practitioners by rising to the greater purpose of higher education and its potential as a space for transformation. Thank you. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments. You can just say amen. Sure. You said you don't need a mic? Well, if they're recording it, it might be good to have it.
First of all, thank you. Mm-hmm. That's such an important talk and discussion. My question is more about how do we do it? And if we do it together, how do we partner? And how do we find those network that you mentioned, or the people who wants to work with us to do it? Because sometimes we feel alone, and this is why I say thank you, is that I feel not alone anymore. And I feel like it's important that we have our peers or leaders from different origin or different generation to guide us how to solve that problem together. So I don't know if it's a question or several questions, but I wish we can be part of something like you mentioned.
Just a quick thing that I just thought about. Like I said, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation has these projects, this Truth and Reconciliation project, in different places around the country. You need to be a part of that network. Some of them are in universities and some of them are not. Second, there is an organization, a university organization, called the American Association of Colleges and Universities, AACNU, which is a liberal arts higher education association. They have one of these grants. And they have a group of universities that are working jointly across the country on this issue. So I suggest that your provost, I suggest that your provost, just writes to the head of the association and say you want to join that network. Because they have about 15 or 16 universities, and then they put out another call. Now remember, there are 5,000 colleges and universities in the United States. So they're doing this ground up. And so I think it would be great for you to be a part of that network. Since you're already doing the work here, linking them. And it's those linkages that produce the kind of foundation, that is really strong. So, yes, sir. Can you say who you are?
Oh, I'm Tom Haley.
Okay.
We have a global economy.
Yes,
Everyone
we do.
talks about cultural competency. You people, as anthropologists, looking at technological competency and capital competency, technology and money seems to be driving what we do.
Seem to be driving what
Yeah, what happens in the global economy?
Oh, I agree. I think that we are part of a global economy that drags us along unless we stop and say, no, this is not how we want to be engaged. This is how we want to be engaged. We want to be engaged with looking at socially responsible corporations. You can make money, but you can also be socially responsible. You don't have to pollute in order to have wealth. I mean, we're not going to overcome capitalism with the work that we do, but we can have our students understand how it can be more humane and how we can push it to be more humane. We also see the power of organizing around pushing companies to change the way they do things by boycotting their products, right? I mean, it's like there are ways to do this. There are ways to engage with companies so that they hear you. They might not always agree with you, but if we don't do that, then you're absolutely right. We're just sort of being whipsawed around, and whatever is going to create the most wealth for companies is where the companies go. But if we say we want both, and if you don't give it to us, you're gonna hear from us. There are going to be some impact and repercussions, and that's where I think the activism comes in, because it's not unlike what I did when I was a younger person, and the farm workers' strike was on. For 7 years, I did not eat grapes. But the result of that was that in California, powerful farming lobbies were broken because they just couldn't they just couldn't handle the fact that people weren't buying the products, and so they listened. So there's that. Thank you for the question, though.
Any other questions?
And then I think we'll have people eat. Okay.
Hi, thank you so much.
Oh, you're
for
welcome.
all that you've spoke about today. So my name is Sade, and
know.
I am a staff person here at the university, and I participate as a commissioner for Women's Commission.
A women's commissioner?
Yes.
Okay.
So as a relatively new professional, I'm working here for a year, what advice would you give to newer young professionals who are a little bit afraid to ruffle the feathers of those that you work for, you work with, while still maintaining the mission and the vision of the university and supporting the campus that the university is in?
Yeah. Yes. I think that one of the things, and again, data-driven research, right, is that you need to surround yourself with people, maybe not one, but a couple of people who you would consider to be mentors. People who are old, and they don't have to be in the unit you are. They shouldn't, as a matter of fact, they shouldn't be in the unit you are. But people who can give you guidance and support about how to deliver information that your boss might not want to hear in a way that is going to be positive, in a way that is going to enhance the unit, or in a way that is not going to be seen as insubordinate or trying to usurp power or whatever. But if it's in service to creating that vision. I mean, that's the beauty of everybody having a mission and a vision that they're buying in. You can use it for all kinds of things. And verse, line, and chapter, right? I'd say, well, according to the academic plan on page 4, section so-and-so, this fits just perfect, right? So you want to keep it on track and make sure that it's not something that's going to derail your career or the institution. I think you can do both. Yes, sir. Say who you are.
Hi, my name is Jim Richardson. I'm a resident of Flint. I'm not a faculty member or part of the University of Michigan community,
Okay.
though I am a resident of the city and very much interested in the relationship between the university and the community. So I guess what I've got to say is not really a question, and I hate those people who stand up who think they have a question but have something they want to say. So
That's okay.
I'm going to say something. It seems to me, as I look at the university and our community, that we've got two different communities. The University of Michigan is located in the center of our city, but less than a quarter of a mile from here, we have a community that is predominantly African American, low income, that do not participate in what the university offers in any way, and the university rarely interacts with the rest of the community. On a daily basis, something like 30,000 people commute into the city, and a large number of those work for the university. So their faculties, the administration, whatever, does not feel as though it is part of what our community is all about. So when we're talking about inclusion and diversity, I guess what I'm looking for is how the university is going to step out of itself and really interact with what is happening within this community, so we don't have two cities in one city. One city poor, low educated, that is surrounding a privileged white institution that comes in and out and doesn't interact very well with it.
Okay. I think that's a challenge for you, but let me say, I can give you two examples of places where this is and was the case. One is in California, downtown Los Angeles, and the University of Southern California. Sits right in the middle of a poor community, the Adams District, and for years, I'm a native, as I was growing up, there was like a wall between this university and that community. With leadership, with inspired leadership, that wall has come down, and they have built town-gown relationships. The second one is where I was in New York City. The City College of New York is in Harlem. The City College of New York, the faculty, the campus did not interact with the people of Harlem, the issues of Harlem, and again, inspired leadership. When I got there, that all changed. So it can happen, but it has to start with someone who wants that to happen and who sees that as integral to the success of the university. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Moses, and thank you all for being here today and for your comments and your questions, your very thoughtful questions. I wanted to introduce myself. I didn't at the beginning of the discussion. My name is Paula Nos, and I'm the director of the Office of Outreach here at U of M Flint. We have a team here of outreach staff who are committed to engaging with the community. And oftentimes people aren't aware of the work we do just because it's hard for us to reach so many different places. So what I wanted to do before Janae speaks and kind of ends the event today, I wanted the whole outreach staff to stand up. And I encourage all of you to interact and engage with the staff as you stay today and as you leave and you continue to work with the university. They're doing lots of different projects, lots of work in the community, great work in the community. We have some staff here who used to be in university outreach. I see Maria there, so Maria could also attest to that. So if you have the chance and you haven't yet met some of our staff, I would encourage you to do that before we leave today. So with that, I'm going to introduce Janae Price. I want to let you know a little story about Janae. Janae leads the Flint Truth and Action Partnership Project. The reason the race exhibit is here in Flint today is because of Janae. Janae discovered the project. She was aware of the work of Dr. Moses. She was determined to bring the project here. She came running to our office one day and said, we can do it, we can do it, we can do it. There's a good deal on the exhibit. We just have to find a home for it. Somebody has to support it. And Janae did not give up. So she did not give up to the point where she convinced Sloan Museum to hold off on some of their renovations to accommodate the race exhibit. So yes, I think we should all cheer for Janae. And I think all of our staff would like to thank Janae for all the hard work she's doing with the Flint Truth and Action Partnership Project. So with that, Janae has some words to add. Thank you.
Well, I don't have much to say. Thank you again, Dr. Moses, for sharing your insight and wisdom with us. Thank you all for attending this event with us. We really appreciate your presence. And let's not end here. So we talked about the efforts of going beyond diversity and inclusion. And that includes the efforts of engaging community as well as doing something with the information that we receive when we have these group conversations. So to start, as we are enjoying our lunch for the rest of our time here, if you can have a conversation with someone that you don't know, and gain new insight and new perspective than what you had when you came in, that would be a stepping stone to us going beyond the basic conversation. And then we'll look internally and move forward to what can we do, what type of behavioral changes can we make in our own lives that'll affect what we do moving forward. And again, thank you all for coming and enjoy your meal.